How do you handle a hostile question after you've given your speech or your presentation? I'm going to give you my reaction and breakdown to a brilliant response that the late founder of Apple, Steve Jobs, gave to a hostile question like that after a presentation that he had given. And I'll pull out the techniques that he uses that you can apply to similar, hopefully less hostile situations in the future. Most of the people who are on the receiving end of a speech or a presentation that you give are very friendly, very respectful. But in every audience, there's usually someone who's going to contradict, attack, or criticize you or what you've said. Those are stressful situations for sure, but they're also terrific opportunities to build credibility with your audience if you handle those situations well. Watch how Steve Jobs handles a very hostile question after a presentation that he had given back in 1997.
You're a bright and influential man.
Here it comes.
It's sad and clear that on several accounts you've discussed, you don't know what you're talking about. I would like, for example, for you to express in clear terms how, say, Java, in any of its incarnations, addresses the ideas embodied in OpenDoc. And when you're finished with that, perhaps you could tell us what you personally have been doing for the last 7 years.
Now that's about as hostile a question as a person can ask. I don't know what he asked. I'm not smart enough to understand the substance of the question, but from the accusation at the beginning, you don't know what you're talking about, to his tone and his body language, it's easy to pick up that this man has a bone to pick with Steve Jobs. You might have noticed that as soon as the question was asked, you could feel the tension in the room rise. In fact, you could hear it by the murmuring of the audience. The temptation in a situation like that is to respond with an equally caustic response, like, "Tell me what you've been doing the last 7 years, Mr. Smarty Pants." But while it might get you a laugh and it might make you feel better, it actually only increases the sense of hostility in the room. Jobs doesn't do that. Watch what he does.
You know, you can please some of the people some of the time, but one of the hardest things when you're trying to affect change is that people like this gentleman are right in some areas. I'm sure that there are some things OpenDoc does, probably even more that I'm not familiar with, that nothing else out there does.
Okay, now I'm going to stop it right there. I want you to notice that instead of increasing the sense of hostility in the room with a caustic response, he reduces the negative tension in the room. And here's how he does that. Number one, he breaks eye contact with the man who asked the question. And then he steps out of the direct line of sight of the man and he walks across stage and he sits down. Now that makes it feel like it's less of a personal thing between him and this man. And number two, notice that he pauses. I don't know about you, but I could have avoided a lot of trouble in my life if I would have just paused before I spoke. He takes a deep breath, and it's quite a lengthy pause, actually. He gives himself time to think, but at the same time, the pause conveys that he's taking this man's question very seriously, that he's weighing out his response. Now, here's the thing. The ability to be silent on stage when all eyes are on you demonstrates poise and confidence. It also communicates, I'm able to handle a tough shot like that. People appreciate the fact that you can have that kind of poise in the face of such hostility. And while he pauses, he also increases the sense of anticipation of what he's going to say. You could hear a pin drop in that room, couldn't you? Normally, when you have an audience that size, there's a certain amount of ambient noise from the audience. People coughing, getting up, chairs moving, bodies squirming. But when people are really engaged and really focused, all of that stops. Now, number three, I want you to notice that he gives credit to the questioner. He says at one point, people like this gentleman. Now notice, by the way, he doesn't say guy, he doesn't say jerk, he says this gentleman. He says people like this gentleman are right in some areas. Now here's why this is so powerful. There's a sense in which the man who asked the question lost dignity by the way he asked the question. It was rude, it was condescending, it was opportunistic, and it's undignified to stand up in front of an audience and take a cheap shot at someone like that. If Jobs responds in kind, he's punching down because he's clearly the most powerful, the most successful, the most respected person in the room. And punching down is equally undignified of a leader or a speaker. And so instead, what he does is he honors the man's question when he calls him a gentleman. And he says he's right in some ways. And this just oozes confidence when a leader is able to say something like this, to say that someone else is right, that you're wrong, to admit that someone else's criticism of you is legitimate, to not get defensive about that. It's one of the most powerful things a leader can do, and it creates empathy from the audience because we know what it's like to be criticized. We know what it's like to get it wrong, and we want our leaders to be big enough to be able to admit it when they're wrong. And when they do, we bond with them. Literally, it has a physiological effect on us. Empathy releases the hormone oxytocin in our brains, and oxytocin is often called the love drug because it facilitates social bonding. Now, I want you to notice what Steve Jobs does next.
And I'm sure that you can make some demos, maybe a small commercial app that demonstrates those things. The hardest thing is, how does that fit in to a cohesive, larger vision that's going to allow you to sell $8 billion, $10 billion of product a year? And one of the things I've always found is that you've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. You can't start with the technology and try to figure out where you're going to try to sell it. And I've made this mistake probably more than anybody else in this room. And I've got the scar tissue to prove it. And I know that it's the case. And as we have tried to come up with a strategy and a vision for Apple, it started with what incredible benefits can we give to the customer? Where can we take the customer? Not starting with, let's sit down with the engineers and figure out what awesome technology we have, and then how are we going to market that? And I think that's the right path to take. I remember with the laser writer, we built the world's first small laser printers, you know, and there was awesome technology in that box. We had the first Canon cheap laser printing engine in the world, in the United States here at Apple. We had a very wonderful printer controller that we designed. We had Adobe's PostScript software in there. We had AppleTalk in there. Just awesome technology in the box. And I remember seeing the first printout come out of it and just picking it up and looking at it and thinking, you know, we can sell this. Because you don't have to know anything about what's in that box. All we have to do is hold this up and go, do you want this? And if you can remember back to 1984, before laser printers, it was pretty startling to see that. People went, whoa, yes. And that's where Apple's got to get back to. And, you know, I'm sorry that OpenDoc's a casualty along the way, and I readily admit there are many things in life that I don't have the faintest idea what I'm talking about. So I apologize for that too. But there's a whole lot of people working super, super hard right now at Apple. You know, Avi, John, Garino, Fred, I mean, the whole team is working, burning the midnight oil, trying to, and people, you know, hundreds of people below them, to execute on some of these things, and they're doing their best. And I think that what we need to do, and some mistakes will be made, by the way. Some mistakes will be made along the way. That's good, because at least some decisions are being made along the way. And we'll find the mistakes, we'll fix them.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. I want you to notice that what he does is that he pivots. He turns this terribly tense, awkward situation around to emphasize some of the important points that he wants to make, like that last one, that some mistakes will be made along the way, and that's good, because that means some decisions are being made along the way. And he said earlier, we started with the customer experience, and then we worked backward to the technology. Those are very important points that he wants to emphasize. So he pivots and he takes this very awkward situation and he makes these profound points using the man's question as a place to launch from. Fifth, I want you to notice that he doesn't try to change the man's opinion. Remember that the question that the man asked him was, tell us what you've been doing for the last 7 years, and not in a way that was genuinely inquisitive. There's a note of accusation in the tone. Now, why doesn't Jobs try to change the man's opinion? Well, one, it would appear to be defensive if he did. And so what he does is instead he apologizes. He said he's made mistakes. Those are very powerful things to do. But second, it would be an incredible waste of valuable time because he's not likely to persuade the man, at least not directly. Instead, while he's got everyone's attention, as I said, he takes the time to reinforce some of the most important principles that Jobs espoused. Okay, that's what I saw in this video. Now, what did you see? What did I miss? Please be sure and comment below. I'd love to hear your observations. Hey, thanks so much for watching. And if you found this video helpful, hit the like button down below. Let me know what you liked in the comments section, what other topics I should cover on this channel, and who else I should react to. And be sure to subscribe for new videos every week for more help with people in communication. See you in the next video.